Welcome everyone. So the number one question that I get asked obviously is, how did you become Muslim? Followed closely by the next question, which is, why on earth would you become Muslim? So that's kind of the purpose of this video today. I will be sharing my journey to Islam, and stay tuned to the end of the video if you want to learn what my biggest takeaway is after 11 years of following the Islamic tradition. So my story begins in Western Canada. As a child growing up in predominantly white localities, being exposed, whether we like it or not, to a lot of racism, obviously not towards myself, but with that, you kind of, as you grow, it just becomes a normality, I guess you could say. And it wasn't that my family is so racist or anything like that, but just the society in and of itself, that we grew up, where we grew up was a lot of indigenous people or natives, and you always kind of have that split, right? It was like the natives, and then you have like the white people, and there wasn't a lot of like even like friends between each other. So myself, actually, I had a lot of native friends, and so it kind of gave me a bit more culture for sure than most people, because I was kind of outside the box, or unconventional, if you will. So kind of growing up with that kind of almost systemic racism, that it's expected that, you know, we're just better than other people because of the color of our skin. And then I had no faith growing up, none whatsoever. There was no inclination towards any religion in my house whatsoever. We obviously celebrated Christmas and Easter, nothing to do with religion, but just because of the fact that we live in Canada and that's the culture of the land. But yeah, no religion whatsoever. So fast forward, when I accepted Islam, it's like going from 0 to 100 in 2 seconds. Like, it was a big deal. Growing up, I had a lot of freedom to kind of do what I wanted within the kind of the boundaries. My father always told me, don't lie, don't cheat, and don't steal. And if you can live by those three things, you'll be doing okay. So my whole life, I've always tried to abide by that. And with that freedom in high school, right? So with that freedom, it exposes you a lot. It exposes you to the alcoholism, it exposes you to the drug addiction, it exposes you to the broken homes. I'm a bit of or at least when I was growing up, I was a bit of an abnormality in the fact that my parents, that I had a mom and dad at home, that my parents were married for 40 years, and it was just kind of a normal thing for me. But all of my friends, and I'm not kidding you when I say all of my friends, and even people who weren't my friends, it was always like single families, that there was a mom at home and then there was the kids. Now the issue with that is that when you don't have a father to discipline you or to put you in line, you kind of have it seems like, you know, you kind of have a bit more of an attitude. I mean, there are some amazing single moms out there. It's nothing to take away from them. I think that they're incredible. I think that they do a lot more than they should have to do. So that men, that's a kind of a call out to you guys, step up and be your baby's daddy like you should be. So I learned, you know, from my parents, I learned a lot. I learned a lot about how to treat people. So when you kind of fast forward and then I'm in high school, and I'm in that just after high school, you see a lot. You see a lot in the Western world, right? You know, when you have friends who are addicted to drugs, it's tough, man. It's tough. And then later I go in life, it's like I look back and I'm like, man, so many of my friends were addicted to drugs, died from drugs, went to jail because of drugs. And I get, you know, you can say, well, it's the circle you hang out with. Well, you know what? It's the circle I hung out with. So it's what I saw. It was the reality of my life. Alcohol, partying, and everything that goes along with that. So, I mean, alcohol, right? Like, everybody's, like they say, working for the weekend. And that's how it was. It was this, and everybody, you know, all the non-Muslims that are watching this know exactly what I'm talking about. Everybody's just dreading the work week, right? Monday's the worst day of the week, and Friday is by far the best, because when you hit that 5:30, it's time to party. And so because of alcohol, right, what happens? Well, I've seen and been involved in, you know, so many fights with friends, even good friends, best friends. You see what they call illegitimate children, right? So a girl goes out, she gets drunk, and then inhibition is gone and ends up getting pregnant. And so the town, it was just a brief side note here. The town that I grew up in, I think, was about 3,000 people. And at my height as kind of a wild crazy teenager, which I wasn't that bad, but it was the #1 town in Canada for teen pregnancy rates. So what does that tell you? Not a very good statistic to be proud of, I'll tell you that much. So when you see all these things, right, you see like, well, what is the solution to this stuff? And it never really dawned on my mind that I needed a solution. I kind of just went about it, that circle of friends that I had, and because the town was so small where I lived, that each little kind of group of friends growing up through school, after school, everybody kind of just meshes together. So you have like, I would be hanging out with people that my sister graduated with, I think 6 years after me, right? So it's a very small town, but kind of close. Everybody understands everybody else and knows everybody else. So I mean, there's quite a few different things that have happened in my life, right? And one of the biggest things, a girl that I went to school with, she was raped by 5 guys, and I mean, it's a terrible story, and that always bothered me so much because of alcohol, right? She got drunk and passed out, and these terrible things happened to her. They beat her up, and I'm thinking to myself, like damn, like this is what we're doing. This is what we're doing to someone's sister, someone's daughter, someone's mother down the road, and that kind of stuff always stuck with me. And then we have the broken homes, man, because of drugs and alcohol. And you see so many people, and they live such a miserable life. And so many people. I mean, everybody knows somebody that's affected by drugs or alcohol. And whether we say it's okay, it's not okay, or obviously there's the parallel between alcohol and drugs. Some people blend them together. There's no difference. But myself, just growing up in that, I mean, after I think a year or two of graduating, we lost 3 people from my grad class, from within a couple of grades to drugs and alcohol. One of the girls that I was supposed to graduate with, she died in a car accident a few months before graduation, because her boyfriend was driving drunk, and she died. So it was a kind of a sad graduation, that you're kind of missing this person that you went to school with. And everything is magnified, right? Such a small place where I'm from. But if you go to a big city, everything is multiplied so much over. And so that's kind of how I grew up and what I grew up in. And then by chance, I moved out and I started to work at electronics place, Future Shop. Doesn't exist anymore. Best Buy, it is what Best Buy is now. And I happened to meet my wife, or would-be future wife, and she was the first Muslim that I had ever met. And obviously, me being raised up in that lifestyle, and I looked at her and I was like, you know what? Wow, she's a pretty girl. So nothing came about. Like, with 3 months, we worked together, never spoke a word to each other, even though like on day 1, I was like, man, she's a pretty girl. So after I got laid off because I was a seasonal, they hired me back because they liked my sales ability, and kind of we started talking. I walked into the staff room. She was the only one there, and she was watching Russell Peters on the TV. And I will tell you that was probably one of the more awkward moments in our relationship, when Russell Peters, for everybody that doesn't know Russell Peters, I can't believe that you don't, and there's probably something wrong with you. But he was making brown jokes, right? And my wife is Pakistani, and I'm the white boy, right? I'm looking, am I supposed to laugh? Can I laugh? Is it offensive? I don't want to offend her. She started laughing at the jokes. I started laughing, and it kind of broke the ice. So Russell Peters, thank you, sir. You broke the ice on what is now a 6-year marriage and a 11-year, 10-year friendship. So thank you for that again. Now, once I was exposed to Islam, right, everybody's like, wow, you just converted to marry her because she's just, she's a pretty girl, and you just wanted to marry her, so you converted because you know that that she wouldn't marry you otherwise. And that's pretty inaccurate, especially if you know my dad. He's the kind of guy that he called me out on that. He's like, what the hell? Why would you do that? Being as I was raised up how I was, to not really care for religion and look at so many alternatives in life. But once I started to look into the faith, right, because she was my first interaction with Islam, and from her, I met her father, and he took me to meet a bunch of people who were, Tablighi Jamaat brothers, which are essentially like Christian missionaries. They travel around different cities, different countries even, to speak to the Muslims. They don't go to the non-Muslims, they go to the Muslims and say, hey, you know what, guys, we need to come back to our faith and practice it according to how we're supposed to. And when I met those guys, it really started to click for me. And when I went to meet the group the first time, I actually gave my shahada, which is your declaration of faith, right? So to be a Muslim is, a lot of people think maybe there's like baptisms or this sort of stuff, but it's so simple. It's a belief in the oneness of God and a belief in the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So that's the kind of core essence of what makes a person a Muslim. Everything else after that can either bring you closer to God, pull you further away from God. So they answered all the questions that I had at the time, which at that point weren't a lot. And so I decided that, you know what, from what I had understood about Islam, and it's really incredible, right? So the white boy from the West looking at this kind of 1400-year-old Arab type religion and realizing that, look, the problems that I had to witness in my life, that this religion solves those problems. And I'm not going to get into comparing with Christianity or anything else at the moment. Those videos will come later on. But Islam prohibits alcohol, right? And it prohibits the intoxication effects from alcohol. In that same regard, it prohibits the intoxicating effects of drugs. So those two things right there, right? That, okay, so had this faith been instilled in me as a child, I would have been saved from a lot of hardships and a lot of hurt feelings and a lot of just crazy times that were completely unnecessary. And not only that, right? So what's next? The broken homes and the broken families. Islam as a whole, one of the most important aspects of it is preserving the family unit. And for me, that was big, huge, because I've seen so many kids in foster care, so many kids that are just shattered because their parents are addicted to drugs or alcohol, and they begin it as a child in and out of ministry care. They grow up and then they just fall in that same path that their parents laid out, and it's heartbreaking and devastating. So Islam makes so much emphasis on preserving the family, and that's why you see, like with Islam, it talks about like punishments for adulterers. It's not meant to punish adultery. It's meant to prevent adultery. It's meant to prevent you from cheating on your wife. So again, that's for another day. But when I saw that, I was like, okay, so now it's really starting to get me. And then I look, okay, well, I know people who are addicted to gambling. I know people who are like degenerate gamblers that just have destroyed so much of their family because they can't stop themselves. Well, no, Islam prohibits gambling. So again, another win. The interest-based system of Western banking, that's a big one, especially with COVID-19 taking place while I'm filming this right now. It's huge because when we look at Islamic banking versus the Western style or Eastern European, Eastern style of banking, right? Interest. So you give me your money. Just bear with me for a second here. You're the bank, right? You come to the bank, you say, hold on to my money. Bank says, no problem. We'll give you a certain percentage amount of interest on your money if you leave it with us. They then take your money and they go invest it, and they make millions and millions and millions of dollars. So they're taking your money to make money. Okay, that's not a terrible thing. So what happens if you're broke? If you have a bank account with them and you're in the negative, what do? They charge you. They charge you. The banks are making billions of dollars by charging the most poor people who don't have enough money in their bank account for a loaf of bread. Essentially, I mean, a compounding interest, you're a slave to this interest-based system. That you think, I'm going to buy this thing for this much money. Well, the money that the bank is lending you is not their money. The bank takes money from all the other people and gives it to you, and then charges you a whole bunch more interest that they're going to take while they give next to nothing to the other people. So this way of enslaving people through money, through interest, is completely prohibited in Islam. Whereas the Islamic style banking is that look, here's the money that you need. If you profit from this, then we profit from this. If there is a loss, we both take the loss. Right now, imagine that. Imagine you buy a house in the West, and not just the West, but with the Western style banking system. If you buy a house with them, then they say, okay, here's $500,000 for the house. We're going to charge you a 3% interest rate on the money, or however much. So they're going to make a whole whack of money off of you. Not only that, it's going to be stretched out over 25 years. So we're going to be making that money for a long period of time. Now, if you decide that you want to sell the house, but it's a bad market, you need the money, you have no other option, you sell the house, you take a huge loss, guess what? The bank's not taking that loss with you. That's all you. So this ideology that the banks are there for you or to help you or to take care of you is a complete, like, just most ridiculous thinking a person can have, especially when you look into how the banking system came about, and like, it's unreal. So again, the slavery of people is prohibited through money, and it just, all of these things kind of started to come to light. I'm sorry to diverge on such a tangent, but I just kind of feel it's important to give that, at least to help you understand why I chose to become a Muslim. So it prohibits all the bad things, but it encourages you to do all the good things. And we live in such a world where people are lost. People are lost. Why do people drink? Why do people drink alcohol? Why? And that was to have a good time. Well, why do we have to drink to have a good time? Because our perception of what a good time is actually quite flawed and twisted. Now that I've been a Muslim for 11 years almost, my idea and my perception of a good time has changed completely and drastically, obviously. What do I love to do most? I love to spend time with my kids. I don't need alcohol to make that better. I love to spend time with my wife. I love to travel. I love to see the world. I love to speak about my faith. I love to, make new friends and all of those sort of things, but I don't need alcohol to make any of that better. And if anything, what I've noticed throughout my adolescence is that when you add alcohol, your true colors come out. That if you're a jerk in real life, you pour alcohol on that person, they just become a bigger jerk. If you met someone who's super happy normally, if they get drunk, they just become more super happy, right? So I don't see a need for that. I feel, if you couple that with the banking system, right? So the banking system right now, COVID-19, they're making billions in profit while people are losing their houses, they're losing their jobs, they're losing their money, they're losing everything. The banks are still making billions of dollars. I'm so happy for you. Alcohol, right? Who's making money from the alcohol? The government's making money from the alcohol. So the government is making money off the suffering and destruction of families and people. But that's cool because the government's making the money off that. Drugs in Canada, marijuana now, they're taking it away from the small little mom and pop people who are growing it to provide for their families. Now they want a piece of it and they want to take it and they want to control it. So Islam prohibits all the bad things that are going to hurt you or harm you and says take with the good and go with it. So when I became Muslim and I started to really look in depth at the Islamic faith, I find all the time, and I'm always learning and I'm always trying to study and listen to people who have vast amounts of knowledge on the topics at hand. And I'm just more blown away, honestly, every day that I was lucky enough and I was blessed enough that God chose me. Like, I didn't choose religion, that God chose me. And, probably my best friend in the world, I was kind of at that, right? It was just before we got married, actually. And I said to him, I was like, man, I know what people are going to say. They're gonna be like, oh, you just converted so you could marry this girl. And this is 5 years after I even met her or even became Muslim. And, my friend looked at me and he said, you know what, bro? He said, even if that's what they say, even if that's what you did, he's like, who cares? He's like, look at you now, right? And at that point, I was leading the prayers, 5 times prayer in our mosque back home, giving speeches to the Muslims, non-Muslims, involved with the interfaith bridging projects, speaking up about controversial issues, trying to enlighten people. So that kind of hit me, and I was like, you know what, that's right. That even if that inclination was there, look at me now, right? I'm proud to be Muslim, and people who know me, I mean, I started a job as an aircraft maintenance engineer fresh out of school, and literally the first thing I did is I went into the lunchroom and I put my prayer mat down and I just prayed right there in front of my whole new crew and everybody that was there, because I just didn't care. So, I mean, it doesn't matter. Like, I pray 5 times a day. I fast on Ramadan. I do everything that I'm supposed to do as a Muslim, and I try to do more. That's kind of the condensed version. But I just wanted to share with the people who always ask me that question: how did you become Muslim? Why did you become Muslim? So there's the answer to those 2 questions. And as I mentioned in the beginning, what is my biggest takeaway after almost 11 years of being a Muslim? My biggest takeaway would have to be the fact that all of the questions I had about life, about death, about how to live my life, about how to solve the problems of the world, all of those questions have been answered through the faith and the religion of Islam. And I look forward to sharing more videos about just what is Islam, what Islam is not, and tackling all of the haters, because I know there are some, a lot, and I look forward to it. So please, if you like this video, even if you didn't like it, I don't care. Hit the subscribe button so you can see every time, and I can drop a new video and annoy you with whatever I'm talking about. Shoot a thumbs up. Leave a comment. Let me know what you thought about this story. And yeah, that's it. Bye for now. And may the peace and blessings of the Lord be upon you, irregardless of who you are. So take care, and we'll talk to you soon.